So Bitcoin is a stone's throw away from hitting $85,000 per coin. You can see here over the last 7 days, if you haven't been in the market, you've missed out on basically a quarter of Bitcoin's gains this year. Bitcoin has actually risen 26% over the last week alone in something that's completely unprecedented. Obviously, last Tuesday, Donald Trump was elected for a second term, the second person in history to actually get a second non-consecutive presidential term. But it begs the question, what other factors are in play for Bitcoin that are driving such fervently bullish price action? Well, there are a couple of things. I'm going to walk through them in today's video. So I'm going to switch up to this other screen here. We're going to blow up the chart nice and big, and I can walk you through piece by piece what's going on here. So first things first, we have this extremely bullish price action. You can see that over the last 8 months, from when it first crested its all-time high back in March to when it finally broke out in early October, and has since been having this insane run. Bitcoin consolidated for about 8 months straight. And what this really did was it set the $60,000 level as a floor for Bitcoin. Bitcoin got boring over the last 8 months as it basically did nothing, channeling between $74,000 and as low as $50,000. And during this time, it allowed a lot of those coins to move from bull market participants to much stronger hands who are going to hold them for the long run. The second thing that's driving this insanely bullish price action for Bitcoin, before we get into the fundamental reason behind all of this, is the largest daily inflow into the Bitcoin ETFs ever. So on Thursday last week, the ETFs bought 17,880 Bitcoin on behalf of their clients, worth $1.35 billion. For reference, that's 33 days worth of new Bitcoin mined. So there are about 450 Bitcoin issued each day. You divide 17,880 by 450, you get more than 33. So essentially, US-based ETF investors are buying Bitcoin at a 33 times higher rate than new Bitcoin is being issued. And so basic laws of supply and demand. But this is just one of the many cohorts of investors who were not around last cycle. So if you think about it, this kind of demand from ETF investors, obviously you have ETF investors who were spot Bitcoin investors as well, and now they're purchasing these ETFs for Bitcoin price exposure in their tax-deferred retirement accounts, for example. But largely, these ETF investors are institutions and other types of entities that did not have access to Bitcoin before. And now, by expanding the cohort, basically the marketability of Bitcoin has risen, and so too has the buy side. And this has driven completely insane inflows. This was the largest net daily inflow ever, obviously hallmarking extreme bullishness. This demand has proven to be one of Bitcoin's largest and most reliable sources of buying thus far. And it's going to continue being a force that drives price up in a big way as retail comes onto the scene and the bull market ramps up, which, by the way, retail investors aren't fully here yet. So, that general bullishness you get where you have friends texting you, extreme euphoria in the market, that's just getting started. Now, of course, the big reason behind all of this, apart from the global easing cycle, which I'll also talk about, is Trump winning last week. So Bitcoin is now resting at, let's go back because it's updating in real time. It's $84,000, right? Trump winning was absolutely massive for Bitcoin. You have to remember, he has an explicitly and avowedly pro-Bitcoin agenda, including firing Gary Gensler, the extremely anti-Bitcoin SEC chair, firing Jerome Powell potentially, which Jerome Powell said that he would not step down if he ended up getting fired, as well as doing things like adopting a strategic Bitcoin reserve, which would mean not only would the U.S. keep its 250,000 Bitcoin, 252,000 Bitcoin it currently owns, but it would also begin actively accumulating Bitcoin. Now, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who I interviewed back in July, you can go check that interview out over at the Bitcoin Layer's YouTube channel. Just search the Bitcoin Layer Senator Lummis. She discussed her plan for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Trump has called it a national Bitcoin stockpile, or a strategic Bitcoin stockpile, would be to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin over the course of 5 years and then hold them for a minimum period of 20 years. And over that time, they would be purchasing 1 million Bitcoin, right? Nearly 5% of the outstanding Bitcoin supply the United States would be buying. Now, of course, this is something that may or may not happen, but regardless, the market is looking at this Trump victory and seeing it as an extremely positive development for Bitcoin, because now, at the very least, over the next 4 years, the United States is going to be aiming from an executive and legislative level, because we've also won all of Congress, both the House and the Senate, to make the United States into the best environment for Bitcoin companies to foster and to develop, right? What the administration is trying to do is make it so that the United States, relative to other countries, is the best place to come, whether you are a Bitcoin capital allocator or a Bitcoin developer or a Bitcoin company or a Bitcoin miner, right? So all of this, right, is excellent for Bitcoin's price, given that the United States is the leader of the free world, and now the next leader of the free world is talking about how he wants to make this the capital for Bitcoin. All of this has driven Bitcoin to close to $85,000 to brand new heights. It is very firmly and decisively broken out of this range that it has been in. But let's talk about what everything else is doing as well. If you take a look here, the top performers on the day are MicroStrategy and Coinbase. These are obviously these two stocks are large, but they're nowhere near the largest stocks in the United States. Today, they're clocking in at number 3 and number 4, respectively, in terms of traded volume. So clearly, there is demand, not just from retail, not just from institutions, but also from Wall Street, right? From traditional investors to get exposure to these Bitcoin derivatives. Obviously, today, Michael Saylor announced he would be buying several $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, I think $2 billion worth of Bitcoin, again, at the all-time high. Which flies in the face of retail investors who think they got in too late. You have an individual like Michael Saylor who's literally buying the top, which completely throws away that entire notion. MicroStrategy is up 18.5% today. Coinbase not too far behind at 17.5%. And these are very small stocks relative to the largest players in the U.S. equity markets. Yet they're number 3 and number 4 in terms of volume today, respectively. And that just continues to paint the picture as to what the demand for Bitcoin and Bitcoin derivatives looks like. And all of this has driven Bitcoin to brand new heights. Over the last week, it has driven it up 26%. We're knocking on the door of $85,000. And not to mention what everything else is doing too. This extremely huge, unprecedented Bitcoin demand has been met with very tepid, if non-existent demand for everything else. You look at the ETH-BTC pair, it is still down 48% from when this cycle bottomed. Of course, ETH-BTC generally rises during bull markets because Ethereum is representative of all other crypto. It's the mother of all crypto, and it should rise relative to Bitcoin in a higher beta environment, but it just hasn't. And this indicates that Wall Street, all these new investor cohorts that I just talked about, are not interested in all this other stuff. There's very little, if any, value proposition for owning anything other than Bitcoin, and Wall Street has come around to this reality because in the same time that this cycle has begun in November of 2022 when Bitcoin bottomed, and even over the last year since institutions have come onto the scene with the launch of the ETFs, people just have not been interested in everything else, and you can see that with the ETH-BTC pair still at or near record lows. And this is confirmed if you look at it's confirmed that this new cohort of investors has no interest in other stuff other than Bitcoin. If you look at the comparison between Ethereum and Bitcoin's assets under management. So if you divide ETH-BTC AUM, if you aggregate all these ETFs and then divide AUM between the ETH vehicles and the Bitcoin vehicles, you see that down in the white line. And in the blue line, it's the ETH-BTC cross. What do you notice? You notice that the assets under management in the Ethereum vehicles are underperforming the ETH-BTC spot pair itself. What does that mean? That means that investors, institutional investors investing in these ETFs are even less interested in Ether than spot investors are interested in Ether, which means that as these new investor cohorts come onto the scene, they are increasingly educated, and it's narrowing this informational arbitrage between Bitcoin and everything else. Historically, they have been bundled together, but now as Bitcoin continues to outperform, these new investors come onto the scene, the market is pricing itself correctly, and it is pricing everything else relative to Bitcoin as mostly worthless. And so expect similar performance over the next several months. Obviously, ceteris paribus, if the U.S. economy can hold up in its current relative strength as it is now. Incoming data is relatively mixed, if not leaning towards strong. And so again, ceteris paribus, if the market holds, Bitcoin will continue to soar and outperform. I don't generally give price targets, but Nick and I, on a basic technical assumption that the breakout from this range Bitcoin has been in will be equivalent to the size of the range itself. You add a $24,000 range size to $73,000. That gets you to about $96,000 to $97,000 per Bitcoin. And it seems, given the price action over the last 7 days, going from $67,000 to $85,000, going up 26%, It seems like that's where the market is headed. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you did find value in this, make sure you like and share. It really helps me out. And go check out Thea. It's the world's simplest Bitcoin custody solution. During this bull market, all these exchanges want to get their hands on your coins in increasingly manipulative and backdoor ways. So make sure you start custodying your Bitcoin, and Thea is the easiest place to do that. You can check out Thea on the App Store, spelled Theya, exactly as you see behind me, or visit app.thea.us to get started on web. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great Monday.